When it came to my parents, I found comfort in avoiding the reality that they were growing old. When my mom was in her 60s, she had a battle with cancer, and she won. My dad had open heart surgery and actually compared it to taking your car in for some needed repairs. My dad had nerves of steel. You pretty much had to if you were going to be a jet fighter pilot, and that's what Dad did during the Korean War. I'm not sure I ever met a tougher man. Sure, my parents were getting older, but there was no reason to think that they wouldn't live forever. Sure, other people's parents passed away, but not mine. It was unthinkable. They had always been there for me. There had never been a moment I couldn't pick up the phone and talk with them, or that I couldn't write to my dad with some problem and have him write back within 24 hours. In my mind, I admitted the possibility that one day they might both pass away, but in my heart, I simply wouldn't believe it. On the morning of December 3rd, 2017, reality hit me hard, like a gut punch. I received a text from my dad containing two devastating words that would forever change my outlook. He simply wrote, "She's gone." Funny thing about facing reality regarding the loss of a parent is that it can be a powerful and motivating force to spend more time with the parent that's still around. And so in late 2018, my dad and I started making plans to take a 3-week motorhome trip together, just him and I. My dad would be 86 years old, but was still very capable and healthy enough to make such a journey, and I, for one, was really looking forward to it. And I think he was too. I had not seen Dad since a family reunion in 2013, and we didn't have the best visit due to some misunderstandings and miscommunication. So I was determined that this trip was going to be a very different kind of visit. My focus was to honor him and do everything I could do to make it pleasant and rewarding for both of us.
Southwest would like to welcome you to Portland. Please remain seated.
And so on May 16, 2019, I landed at Portland International, and my best friend Mark Horn, who lives in Vancouver, picked me up at the airport. Meanwhile, my dad drove his motorhome to Mark's house, and a few days later, we started on our journey. Our first stop was to be my hometown of Richland, Washington, to visit with my brother Mike and his family, and to walk my old stomping grounds containing so many cherished childhood memories. Growing up in Richland in the 60s and early 70s, Dad would often take us on walks on the dike on the edge of the beautiful Columbia River. On this sunny day in May of 2019, Dad would once again accompany us on that familiar trail that conjured up so many memories of when the world was young and life seemed to stretch out into infinity. It was a good day. Later, we settled in at Mike and Dua's house, and as my dad relaxed on a comfortable recliner, likely enjoying one of Dua's famous Mai Tais, I left to go on a walk through my childhood memories. Richland was one of those small towns that you could comfortably walk from one side to the other side of town in an hour's time. And so I walked by one of the houses I used to live in on McPherson, my Nanny and Papa's house on Marshall, uptown where all of us neighborhood kids would hunt for boxes in the alleys that would later serve as clubhouses or giant computers. I visited the site of my old grade school. The old had been torn down and replaced by an entirely new building I didn't even recognize. I stopped by the legendary home of the Richland Bombers, where I bought Dad and I some bomber shirts. Of course, I had to visit my childhood home. It had been almost 50 years since we had lived there, and it looked almost exactly the same. I even stopped by Mally's drugstore, where I used to spend many hours poring over Hulk comics before buying basketball cards for my collection, some of which I still have. Just across the street from Mally's was the Richland Baptist Church, where my Papa C.C. Henson was a founding member and served as a deacon for over 4 decades. This was also the church that my parents were married in. Growing up in Richland, our family spent a lot of time with my parents' best friends, the Holemans. They had 3 kids that were close in age to us, and back in the day, we went on several camping trips together. And so Dad and I took the opportunity to go to that familiar house on Cotwood Street, where they had lived in for as long as I could remember. And we even brought along some of Dua's famous egg rolls. On what was a typical beautiful summer-like evening in May, we had the privilege of enjoying one of Mike and Dua's barbecued steak dinners on the patio. Value? Priceless. On May 22nd, we left Richland to visit the place of my birth. My dad went to WSU then, and they lived and managed a trailer court, while Dad earned a degree in electrical engineering. Unfortunately, Dad couldn't locate the old trailer court, but we did find the hospital where I was born. From there, we crossed the state line into the great state of Idaho. We had some beautiful views on our way to my cousin Ron's house in Potlatch. We had a nice visit at Ron's and had the chance to visit some property he had along the river, not far from where he lived. It was a nice place just to get away from it all and relax, surrounded by nature. I know Dad's dog Lucy loved it. The next day, we drove to Meridian, Idaho to visit my cousin John and his sweet wife Sandy. I hadn't seen John since Papa's funeral in 1994. We had a great visit, and little did I know at the time, but John would soon become closer than a brother. So far, the trip was going just as planned. Along the way, Dad made a point to teach me some things about driving the motorhome should something happen to him. That caught me by surprise, as I still had this crazy idea that my dad was invincible, and there was absolutely no chance that any health issue could possibly incapacitate him. After all, he was Dad! Our next stop was the L&D in Mount Vernon, Oregon. Mom and Dad bought this property back in the early 80s and built a home there. Back in the late 70s, they often discussed whether they would build their dream home in the mountains or at the beach. And they made their decision and never looked back. They loved that place and made many wonderful memories there. And on this particular trip, Dad and I were making our own memories. Dad barbecued some burgers for dinner and even made some of his special sauce. Later, we watched a movie before retiring for the evening. The movie was Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. That evening, Dad and I were just a couple of guys stretched out on the double recliner watching an action flick about men being men. You know, breaking things and smashing people's heads and beating them up to a bloody pulp. It was a good time. The last week of our journey would have us meeting up with Sherry to spend a week on the Oregon coast. This was to be the highlight of the trip. We all loved the beach and the ocean. What I didn't know at the time was that it would be the final week I would ever spend with my dad.